Have you ever watched a world-class show jumper effortlessly clear a massive obstacle and thought about the sheer physics involved? To the untrained eye, it kind of looks like an illusion of pure grace, right? Like the horse is doing all the heavy lifting. Well, today in this explainer, we are completely shattering that illusion. We're looking at an absolutely fascinating biomechanical analysis presented by Dr. Christophe Delong and Kinexa. We're going to break down the jaw-dropping hidden science of what is, arguably, one of the most complex motor control challenges in the living world.
Okay, let's dive into this, because to truly understand what a rider's actually doing up there, you have to look at the numbers. 244. That is the number of joints in the human body that a rider must perfectly coordinate, literally in a matter of milliseconds, just to stay in the saddle during a jump.
And those joints, they give the rider 54 degrees of freedom. Just think about the extreme physical tension happening here. You've got a massive 650-kilogram animal generating several kilowatts of explosive power beneath you. And balancing right on top of it is the rider's relatively light, hyper-complex, polyarticulated body, trying to manage all that insane force without getting in the animal's way.
So, to make sense of this incredible feat, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the unique challenge, walk through the 4 jump phases, look at the rider's anatomy, dive into the brain in action, examine the physics of the center of mass, and finally, wrap up with the excellence parameters.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the unique challenge of neurobiomechanics. Why is this so incredibly difficult?
What we are dealing with here is a highly dynamic, multidimensional system. The rider isn't just, sitting there. They are actively managing massive 3-dimensional oscillations from the horse. And they aren't making these adjustments slowly. Oh no. The human body is forced to execute neurological and physical corrections in a tiny window of just 20 to 600 milliseconds. It's basically a constant, high-speed negotiation with gravity.
To see exactly how this negotiation unfolds, let's move to Section 2, the 4 jump phases and their strict timeline.
A jump breaks down into 4 distinct phases, and every single one demands specific adjustments measured not in meters, but in millimeters and grams. First up is the approach, where the rider has to filter out the horse's oscillations, tolerating a lateral sway of just 1 to 3 millimeters. Literally tiny. Second is the impulsion. This is pure explosion. The horse's hind legs are generating 20 to 35 kilonewtons of force. Third is flight, where the rider maintains an aerodynamic posture and executes what's called the release of the reins. And finally, the landing, where the rider instantly absorbs 3-dimensional forces equaling 2.5 to 4 times the horse's body weight, restabilizing in a fraction of a second.
Which brings us to Section 3, rider anatomy, the actual hardware of the jump. How on earth does a human body withstand that?
Well, it all starts from the ground up, right at the ankle, the primary pivot of the entire system. This is where the incredibly high stakes of tiny measurements become very real. If a rider has poor absorption at the ankle joint, that force travels up the body and causes a mere 3 to 6 millimeter deviation in their pelvis. Doesn't sound like much, right? But that tiny, almost invisible deviation is enough to disturb the horse's back right at the critical moment of impulsion.
And this brilliantly illustrates the chain reaction happening in the body. Moving up from the ankle, we hit the knee, which is basically the ultimate human spring. During the jump, the knee alone is responsible for dissipating 30% of the vertical force. And upon landing, it flexes at a blistering angular velocity of up to 600 degrees per second. It literally snaps into place to absorb that massive shockwave.
Right above the knees, we hit the nerve center of it all, the pelvis and hips. This is the conductor of the movement. Now, if the rider advances their pelvis just 2 centimeters too early, they pass ahead of the motion, and the horse actually loses its rounded shape over the jump. On the flip side, if the pelvis stays just 5 centimeters too far back, it forces the horse to defend itself, hollowing its back and completely ruining the trajectory. So the margin for error here, it's virtually zero.
Finally, we get to the upper body, the shoulders, elbows, and wrists. Their job is ultra-fine transmission. The rider's hands have to perfectly match the stretching of the horse's neck, opening anywhere from 8 to 25 centimeters during flight. But what's really staggering is the precision. The wrists are making rapid microflexions of just 1 to 2 degrees to maintain a contact tension of a mere 20 to 80 grams. If your hand is too hard, you destroy the horse's dorsal arc. Too soft, and you lose longitudinal balance. It is gram-level precision happening at blinding speeds.
But of course, the physical body is nothing without the software running it, right? So let's shift focus to Section 4, the brain in action, looking at the central nervous system.
To pull all this off, the central nervous system is running a massive background processing task, coordinating 3 loops simultaneously. You've got the spinal loop handling automatic reflexes at the ankles and knees. You have the subcortical loop in the cerebellum managing the semi-automatic posture of your trunk and pelvis. And then the cortico-cognitive loop, your conscious brain, handling the trajectory and strategy.
Now, what's really interesting about this timeline is how we process these inputs. Look at vision. It takes 120 to 250 milliseconds for the eyes to even tell the brain what's happening. But by the time the rider consciously sees something, their vestibular system and proprioception have already reacted. The inner ear vestibular system reacts to those 3 to 5 g-force accelerations in just 7 to 15 milliseconds. So practically all of the balancing and adjusting happens on a deeply subconscious level, milliseconds before a conscious thought ever even forms.
This reliance on feeling rather than seeing is exactly why proprioception is known as the queen of the jump. Without it, staying stable is utterly impossible. The rider's muscles and tendons are packed with sensors that detect microstretches as incredibly tiny as 0.05 millimeters, and they sense tension changes as light as 10 grams. This ultra-sensitive feedback loop is the magic behind those lightning-fast reflex corrections.
Let's move to Section 5, Physics and Center of Mass, and see how this all builds when we zoom out to look at the complete, combined system.
The absolute dichotomy of forces the rider manages simultaneously is just staggering. Check out the force on the stirrups versus the optimal tension on the reins. During landing, the rider is absorbing up to 500 newtons of force straight through their legs and stirrups. But at that exact same split second, they have to maintain an incredibly delicate feather-light tension of just 300 to 800 grams on the horse's mouth. I mean, it's literally like catching a cannonball with your legs while trying to thread a needle with your hands.
So the crucial point is how the rider manages their center of mass through all of this chaos. The absolute optimal position is keeping their center of mass within just 5 centimeters of the vertical line of the stirrups. If they lean just 5 centimeters too far back, the physics change dramatically. It increases the horse's moment of inertia, forces the animal to compensate, and results in a 10 to 20% loss of jumping power in the dorsal arc. Think about that. A tiny 5-centimeter shift in human mass ruins the biomechanics of a 600-kilo horse.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, Excellence Parameters, the ultimate metrics of a master.
Dr. Delong and Kinexa highlight these frankly mind-boggling parameters of excellence. An expert rider keeps their trunk oscillation under 2 degrees. Their pelvic sway, less than 4 millimeters. They apply leg pressure adjustments of just 1 to 3 newtons. Their head displacement is kept under a single centimeter for perfect visual and vestibular stability. Their ankles make rapid 1 to 2 degree flexions, and they synchronize their entire body with the horse in a remarkably tight window of just 20 to 40 milliseconds. Absolutely wild.
When you step back and put it all together, the rider is managing kilonewtons of force, operating 3 simultaneous neurological loops, and seamlessly fusing their movements with a massive animal. It's this beautiful, harmonious blending of physics, biology, and sheer athleticism. It easily stands as one of the most complex examples of human motor control across all sports in existence.
So, here's a thought to leave you with. The next time you see a rider effortlessly guide a horse over a soaring obstacle, remember the hidden science occurring just beneath the surface. If a flawless jump requires a human to perfectly master 244 joints and 600 kilograms of raw power in a fraction of a millisecond, is there truly any sport more complex? It definitely gives you a profound new respect for the equestrian athlete. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.